Hello and welcome to AXSChat. We're delighted to be joined today by Shilpi Kapoor. Shilpi is the founder and CEO of BarrierBreak and 24/7 Accessible Documents. So 2 accessibility businesses for the price of 1, or is it 2 for the price of 2? I'm not quite sure. Anyway, it's really good to have you here with us. And I know we were speaking at Enabling back in Washington a couple of months back, but we don't talk enough to people that are doing accessibility work in India, partly because of the time difference, but it's great to have you with us. So can you tell us a bit about, firstly, who you are, how you came to be working in the accessibility space, and what you're up to right now, because you're doing a lot of amazing stuff.
Well, firstly, Neil, thank you to you, Debra, and Antonio for getting such an amazing thing like AXSChat on in the world. Because I think, as you said, we really do need more and more conversations around this. So I'm Shilpi Kapoor. I'm CEO, as Neil said, of BarrierBreak and 24/7 Accessible Documents, and a third company, actually, Neil, Newshook, which is a news and media site. So actually 3 for, I don't know the price of 1 or 10, but something to that ratio. So you asked, how did I get into the space? It's actually a very weird story. So as a young kid out of college, I got hooked onto the internet, and I walked into a chat room to learn how to hack. And I met a lot of cool people in the chat room. And one of them taught me a lot about hacking, and then offered me an internship to secure servers around the world, which was really interesting. So I worked for this person for about 2 years, interestingly, in a US-based company, Debra. And one day, he and I were on the same shift, and I caught the hacker before he did. And he was somebody that I've really, really learned everything about hacking about. And I said, how did that happen? How did I beat you to this game? And that's when he told me, and he said it so casually, he said, the reason you beat me is because my computer is not doing very well today. I'm waiting for the technician to come in, and I haven't really told you for the last 2 years that I'm paralyzed, and I use a sip and puff device. And today the computer ain't working very well, so you beat me to the game. And for 2 minutes I was dumbfounded, because I was like, I know you for 2 years. I had no clue. There was no video chat like this at that time. So it was internet relay chat. Everything was text. I did speak to him, but he never ever told me about this. So for me, the shock was, and when I think of paralysis, I always thought at that time specifically that the person would be able to do things. You wouldn't be fast. And hacking is a very fast job. So I was like, okay, this is crazy. So it took me some time to settle down with it. But then when I sat down and started talking to him more, I got to know about the concept of accessibility. And this is right back when it was Windows 3.1 and Windows 95 initially. And, accessibility was trickling in. And that's really how I started. And before I knew it, I started the first computer training center in India for the visually impaired, teaching them computers. And then decided I didn't want to be a nonprofit, and thus came about BarrierBreak as a business model. So I think that's the short of it.
Excellent, thank you, Shilpi. And I am fascinated by that last bit. So obviously there's the whole. Well, firstly, it's interesting because he basically exploded your unconscious bias around disability. So that and changed the course of your life in the process.
Very true.
And by expanding on that, the course of other people's lives too. So I mean, that's a fantastic story in itself. But I also think that then I'm interested in the fact that you said, I got fed up with the idea of running stuff as a not-for-profit. Why do you think, and I'm really interested in this, and disability-owned business and accessibility as a profitable and viable business, What was it that drove you to reach that conclusion and move into the sort of for-profit sector rather than stay in the non-profit sector?
So I'm non-profit, and there were 5 of us. Interestingly, 4 of us were visually impaired, and I was the sighted person. It was amazing that they all wanted to do good, but they had limitations of the way that they saw the opportunity. So it was kind of like going to people and saying, we're teaching computers to the blind. Can you please give us an internet connection for free? Can you please give us computers? Can you please give us technology? And the conversation was always about that, right? But on the flip side, I was always telling the visually impaired, I'm not going to let you get this for free because there's no value to free. So you need to pay something, not a big amount, but you need to pay something which we actually might give back, for the people who top the class and have the best attendance and all of that. But very, very soon what I realized was that the system was against us, right? And this was back in 1997, and nobody wanted to hire these amazing people that I was teaching computers to, right? They were yet getting the same telephone operator jobs, right? And I was like, oh God, what's the point of teaching somebody, giving them this opportunity, and then having it fall flat because, we only work with people with disabilities when it's charity. The next thing that started to happen was, as a charitable point, I could only run charitable initiatives which I had funders for. And I wanted to do things that were above and beyond and not get stuck to who was giving me the money and thus I was doing this thing, right? Because I realized it was limiting how much I could expand or think or work in this space, right? So the only way to do this is if I can control my own money and not have to be dependent on someone else. And the instant was, but why can't this be a revenue model, right? Because if it is, then we can earn money. We can pay people well. We don't have to pay them an pittance, for the great job that they're doing because you're disabled. And I could change the paradigm. So it was about all of that. The next thing was about the business opportunity, because by then I had already realized that there were these millions of people out there and nobody wanted to think about them. So everything came together, in my head. And I said, aren't we trying this from the wrong side? We keep talking about charity and we're not, moving the needle. Maybe we need to try another approach. And that's really what we did with BarrierBreak.
Fantastic, and I've been saying for a long time, and I know that I'm not alone in this, that people don't value what they don't pay for.
True.
And therefore we need to find models that do bring in revenue, and like you say, we don't go out with the begging bowl for stuff, and we are able to determine our own sense of direction and where we want to go and everything else. Debra, I know you've got a question. Hoping your internet connection is going to stand up long enough.
I know. I apologize. We've had so many lightning storms in Virginia lately that it keeps hitting the towers and messing with our Wi-Fi. So I apologize. Shilpi, thank you so much for finally being on the program. We love your work, and I love how you understand. You understood quicker than a lot of us why this cannot be about charity. This is good business. And what you've done in India is impressive, but you haven't just done it in India. I know that you've worked with, I know that my company Tech Access subcontracted to you, and Rue Global, we work with you, and you've worked with so many corporations all over the world, especially here in the United States. So you've taken this little dream and you've made it into something really powerful. And I think it gives people a lot of hope. And the quality coming from your team has always really impressed me too. So it seems like in India, it might have been harder for you to do this than maybe in other countries like the United States, but you did it anyway. So how did you overcome some of the obstacles that have and continue to be thrown in your way?
That is an amazing question, Debra, because that has been quite a journey. So There were two people when I started on my accessibility journey that I met. One was Mary, and the other one was Debra. And I started working on this space. I was very fortunate right at the start to have a venture capitalist that came in and invested in us and believed in the business model. And that was validation in its own, because when you have a venture capitalist who says, I see a business model here, let me back you with some money, it was amazing. But that was only the start. And after that, it was downhill from there, right? So the initial model for us was that we would go to Indian IT companies and tell them that you service the US market and you service Section 508 in most of your contracts. So why don't you work with us and we can help test your products and see that you give the right solution to the customers. I was very fortunate that I've had a very great network of VCs in India, and they put me in touch with some of the best companies in the world in India. And when I started meeting them, everybody said such an amazing idea. And I was a kid at that time. I was 27-year-old. So everybody would be like, brilliant idea, fabulous start. We love what you do, but we can't work with you, right? Interestingly, it was the first 3 years that we heard no, 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 and no, again and again. We'd also started working with the government of India, right? And we wanted them to bring policy into India. And we actually worked on getting something called the Guideline for Indian Government Websites in 2009, released by the Indian government. And it was a lot of effort, right? And I hoped for government business. And that wouldn't happen because they had no way of understanding how they would work with somebody like us. So we landed up at this point where we said, oh God, either we shut down the company and this dream, or we do something else. And Debra, that's actually why we started to look at the US market, right? Because we said, if we can't do this from here, we need to do it from there, right? And I remember coming to my first CSUN and being the only Indian at CSUN at that time. And I was this, literally everybody was like looking at me and saying, who the hell is she? And it was interesting. But yes, we managed to get past all of that. I must say we yet service more of the international market than the Indian market because India yet does not have such an understanding. But the hope that we will service India hasn't been lost. But if we didn't look at the rest of the world, we'd probably shut down and not be able to hire the 200 people that we hire, right? So that's where we had to make a call. So as much as I would first want to do for India, and I think that's why Newshook came out for us, because I wanted to yet give back and not just do BarrierBreak, which is revenue making. And so you do a little for passion and you do the little for something else.
And I just want to point out, you did hear Shilpi right. She said she's hired 200 people, many of them with disabilities. And many of the accessibility companies, for example, in the United States, they don't have 200 people. So that shows you what she's accomplished. It's very, very impressive. And I've always been a big fan and loved watching how creative. You're a very, very strong entrepreneur. And I love that you're a woman too. So let me turn it over. Antonio, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. So you pointed something very interesting in the way how you were, people were looking at you in the United States, what you are doing here, but in India, when you are at let's say at the networking event with people from universities, from companies, how do you introduce yourself, and are they surprised in relation to the work that you are doing, or realize, well, there's something here that we need to engage with?
So they're surprised in the work we're doing. A lot of them think we're a charity. They don't believe that we're a business. And when we do introduce ourselves today more and more, because what we did was, Antonio, we stuck to the digital accessibility space. And we said we can't change physical accessibility, but digital is always changing and evolving. And hopefully there will be more of a difference that we can make back home with that. So we do find it a huge challenge. That's why a lot of us have clubbed us as a social enterprise, and we get introduced as that very often. But it is yet a challenge when we meet universities and we meet colleges and students, etc., they wonder about how this whole thing is going to play out, right? So when, like, I know I speak at IIT Mumbai from time to time on this piece of accessibility, and they're some of the best minds in the world that study there. But the way they understand accessibility and the way we want them to understand accessibility is very different. So I think that struggle yet continues to some extent, that we're looked at as outsiders, we're looked at as doing for a group of people who aren't really mainstream. And do we really want to look at this market? Or it's a good thing to do, maybe we'll help you. So that dialogue is yet very much there. It's shifting, but very few people yet look at it as a business opportunity, which is the way I want to do it. I don't want to do it as here's the charitable money of it.
No, over the years on AXSChat, we have interviewed several people from India doing different types of work, more working in software, supporting people with learning disabilities and neurodiversity, and others
Right.
working in a more space of improving physical access. And this is what we realize, at least I realize that, is from in the side of individuals, people who are basically put their own effort to change, to create change. It will be by they create their own startup, or because they work for a company and they have enough money to sponsor or to promote physical disability outside and inside work. So do you see that this awareness about the importance of accessibility being driven by individuals like you and other guests, or you see that also some willingness from the public sector to drive that?
I think both. Today we are seeing, the public sector also having a play in this. I'd really urge you to look at our website, newshook.com. There's so many amazing stories out there, right, of things that people are doing. Individuals, young kids who are becoming entrepreneurs in this space, the government, and there is a shift which is happening very clearly. But the problem is it's not systemic, it's not repeatable. So I keep telling people that the reason that I run the news site is I hope that people learn from each other, right? And they don't live in these silos, right? And that's what really hampers accessibility, because you have a great idea, you have a great training program, but it's happening in one city and one state, and it's not getting done everywhere, right? So it's about that scale thing. So I think what's really, really interesting is you do see that happen, but I think you need these connecting points. And I think that's the biggest thing about accessibility, right? Even when we talk to the developers, so many of them don't know accessibility. They're amazing developers. But if you actually show them the opportunity, we hope that at least we can convert some of them, right? And that's the same thing that I see happening in India, right? The good thing is it's happening, and that makes me proud. And I think we're just about a couple of years behind the rest of the world, right? When it comes to this agenda. So we're catching up slowly and steadily.
I would just a quick comment, Neil. I wouldn't say that you are behind others. No, you are doing things differently, and probably in some cases you are innovating more than others. Because what we have seen over the years here for people that we interview in AXSChat is about practices being done differently across the world. Okay, but we've seen that sometimes in countries we have people from South America, oh no, we are behind. But in fact, what they were developing was far ahead. So I think you should really value the work that you are doing, and that probably you are doing something more advanced and sophisticated that might happen in Europe or in the United States. That's just my final comment on what you were saying about.
Thank you, Antonio. Appreciate that. Yeah.
So we know you do business internationally, but you're also engaged in lots of global initiatives within the industry as well. So you're engaged with G3ICT, the IAAP, and lots of other things. So why is that? I mean, Debra and I both also IAAP members and engage with same kind of things. But what is it that you see that brings value to yourself and to BarrierBreak and maybe beyond from your engagement in these kind of initiatives?
So I think one, India needs a voice, and India needs someone to say yes, accessibility does happen here. I think we have, over the years wanted to be that voice, and we hope that we can continue to do that. Um, so that's an India perspective. From a BarrierBreak perspective, I think it's very important that we would like to be one of the leaders in this space, and globally we'd love to be on the same standing. So I get a high, if you can say that, when I think about, oh, there's a visually impaired person in India who's testing something for an American company which is becoming accessible, and then that is coming back to India because that service is also being offered by them in India. And it's a high for me to think that that's even possible, right? Because people think it's not an option. So I think from a BarrierBreak perspective, that is something I love, right? Personally, it gives me pride to say that, we were the first to start the conversation in India. The disability sector wasn't ever talking about this in India. We started TechShare India. We were the first to have a conference of that size and scale on accessibility in India in 2008. And we kind of said, oh, the world can't come to CSUN. Maybe CSUN comes to India in our own small way. So I think we did all of those things, and it makes me proud to say that we managed to do that collectively. And then obviously, from an international perspective, to have people say that India is represented. There is somebody in India who's doing some great work, right? We also hear the other side of it, that lots of companies don't know what they're talking about when it comes to accessibility. But we also want India not to be left behind in this conversation, right? So being a part of something like IAAP, for example, right, is a pleasure because it's about starting, working with professionals in this space, creating a professional community in this space, which doesn't exist today. G3ICT, I think when you look at, and I have to thank Axel Lebois for sure for this, because he and I caught up for the first time in 2007. We had no clue what we'd do together. We just liked each other. With him, we went and, we helped create the law and policy while we were in South Africa, in Mexico. We did an entire course on UNCRPD and what it means for accessibility for India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, based out of India. And we ran a training program with them for this, right? That's impact, because there were people who had no idea about digital accessibility, who had no idea that Windows had a feature, which was magnifier or narrator or any of these things. And we could help impart that knowledge and be a part of that conversation. So as much as it's about making money and having a business that works, it's also about giving back. And I think a lot of these associations help us give back.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing.
In other ways.
So I think we'll just wait for Shilpi's internet connection to repair here. We've got a battle of the weak internet connections today. So Shilpi, you were talking about doing stuff, mapping the CRPD to accessibility. There's something that I'm really interested in, and I think that I'm interested in the idea of taking sustainability frameworks and the idea that inaccessibility is like pollution. That when we produce products that aren't accessible, that inaccessibility is an externality because people aren't paying. Sure. There are reporting frameworks that businesses use, such as the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, such as the global reporting indices. And they tend to look at social impact, but they do it around things like the UNCRPD, but there's no framework to it. So I'm really interested to know about how you mapped that, the CRPD to something somewhat more measurable and concrete.
Well, what we did was, I think G3ICT has more credit on this side than I do. what we did was we created awareness about how CRPD could be a measure, right? And what was there within CRPD and how could we use that as a measure to understand what was happening globally in this space, right? And I think, to your point, Neil, I think there is a lot of merit in creating a framework around all of this and adding it to sustainability reports, to CSR reports like in India, and having that getting measured, and even going to governments and saying, why don't you incentivize some of these things? Green can get incentivized. Why can't accessibility get incentivized? So I'd love to work with you on that, because I think there's so much to be done, and there's so much that can be done to put it into a very interesting opportunity where corporates don't have to lag behind or don't have to do this because, we got sued, but are doing this because they're getting brownie points and going up the ladder with those. So I'd love to see that happen.
Yeah, because I think, we, as a company, Atos is very good on our reporting about carbon and our energy use and stuff like that. So we get, top ratings for sort of sustainability in that kind of measurement, and we report on all of these indices. The bits around social responsibility, the bits around social impact and measuring via the CRPD aren't mandatory. So what you end up getting is companies are doing stuff, but it's all anecdotal, and then that means that it's not measured and it's not structured and all of this kind of stuff. So what I'm hoping for is for people like yourself, people like me, people like Debra and others to look at ways that we can help give business structure, because I'm not anti-business here. I'm actually pro-business, and we need to understand that their business model's got to be sustainable, and we've got to help them and help society at the same time, because actually it's a symbiotic relationship. So trying to work out what those measures are is really interesting to me. And I think there's, I don't know, if you've been working on TechShare, you'll know Kevin Carey from RNIB.
Yeah.
So Kevin had this idea about peer normative equivalence of experience and ease of use. So the next thing that we're thinking about is, how do we measure what peer normativity is? How do you take that at scale? So because we've been debating this, right? And it's a tricky one, because at a top level, it's a brilliant concept. Yeah, it's well, do they get the same kind of experience as everyone else that you would expect to get? But how do you measure that across an organization like mine, for example, that has maybe 10,000, 12,000 pieces of software? How do you measure that across different disability groups with different levels of need? So you've got reasonably good measures of accessibility for certain disability types, which you'll know yourself. You've worked in the blind and visual impairment space for a long time. How do we measure that for things like cognitive, mental health, some of the more difficult and more subtle motor conditions? And how do we create an aggregate score? I'd love to know your thoughts on how we might achieve that, because we're thinking quite deeply about this.
Well, that is a conversation for another day and another time, but I do have thoughts on that. I think it's doable by having companies map this by doing user journeys testing of solutions, services, offerings. The user journey by, like a market research firm, which does a user study rather than the company themselves only measuring themselves, and then that being used as a data point. So I think there is merit in getting people with disabilities as a part of that conversation to do that measure point. And I think I have created a small scale. Actually, it was done for a customer that we were trying to sell the idea that they needed more user engagement and more people with disabilities as a part of the accessibility testing, because so many people test without disabled people and just test with people like you and me who are great accessibility experts, but we're not people with disabilities, we're not native users. So I think that taking the user journey concept, which is there in using user experience in other areas, how can we take that and create measures, even if it's a sample group of 10 people giving you a rating? That would be interesting rather than saying the company put it together. So I think there's a way to start from something like that. But I think it needs more conversation and more companies like ATOS who come forward and say, we'd like to experiment with it and let's try. And if it works, then we start rolling it out to people like ILO and people like that who can then take it globally with us. Right? I think that's the way I'd love to see it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that's essentially taking a kind of audit. It's almost like an audit approach, and it's finding. Yes, there's finding the people, and it's then working out how you would have to sort of do a 1 in 10 approach. You do. I'm going to take a sample, and it would be a representative sample, I guess, in order to determine. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And it would certainly keep us busy.
Yes, it would. Why not?
Yeah, fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit more about Newshook? Because I think that's something you were talking to Debra and I about whilst we were in enabling, and you're getting the disability specific news stories out there. But tell us a little bit more about that, please.
The Newshook, firstly, let me spell it out for you because I had to do a wordplay because I didn't get the domain. So it's NEWZHOOK. So Newshook as a site started off actually as a curated news site. That's how we started. We found that there wasn't enough information about disability. So what we did was we started curating news. Very soon we realized that the curated news out there was not great. It was the same story, just told 40 times over. So we said, okay, we're going to start writing news. And we did that. And we started a newsroom, and not only a newsroom with an editorial team, but we also started a newsroom with deaf reporters. And we started a sign language newsroom in addition, right? And we started covering stories. We started a little bit of headlines, things that are happening in mainstream because news itself was inaccessible. And then we took it to areas like education, employment, technology, accessibility. We just started our latest feature called Lifestyle, which is doing fabulously. So if you want to buy clothes, a lot of disabled people tell us, on the website.
I'm sure Shilpi will be back in a second. She says she's got 3 mobile phones. Yeah, we can.
One of
Some
the areas
tactile
where
embossed.
Sorry, Shilpi, we missed you for a second there. I think your internet was dropping.
Am I back? No.
You're back.
Oh, fabulous. I'm assuming you can hear me.
We can, yes.
So where did you hear me to? Okay. So Newshook basically has gone from a news and curation website to more a media site focusing on connecting people with disabilities to solutions, opportunities, as well as brands, right? And there were inclusive brands. Thanks to you, I'm using the keyword today. So I think that is fabulous. So Newshook is now about 4,000 stories around disability inclusion, and about 400,000 people that view the information in a month, and it's growing ever so much.
Excellent. And you have plans to take it to other territories and other parts of the world?
So I think, thanks to all the conversations I had with all of you all at Enabling, I think it's going to start with a US content very soon first. We'd love to come to UK and take that next. So we will start with English-speaking countries because it's easier for us content there. But Newshook is looking for partners in both these countries to help us start off, and do something like what we did for India, because I hear the user stories are not there even in the rest of the world. Though I thought India was behind, but I soon realized that it's the same problem everywhere.
Yeah,
right. So
absolutely.
If anybody out there is looking to support something like that, come on board, help us with resources, help us with content, please reach out.
Excellent. Thank you. We've had a great half an hour. Even the rubbish internet connections around the globe can't stop us. I need to thank our supporters, Barclays, Access, Microlink, and MyClearText, for continuing to make sure that AXSChat is available and accessible. And we really look forward to you joining us on Twitter in the middle of the night for you, or early Wednesday morning, Tuesday night, everyone else. Thank you very much, Shilpi. It's been a real pleasure.
Anytime. Thank you. Thank you, all three of you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Shilpi.
Thanks, Debra. Thanks, Antonio.